cut my machine on. Is it accidental that only men have won the door prizes? Is that a male headship kind of thing you guys have at this church? Or, like, I don't know. I don't think Paul talks about that. It's like, I don't know, just saying, man. I'm glad to be back with y'all. And I applaud you. I mean, for taking your Saturday morning. I'm covetous for my Saturday mornings. Usually right now, I want to be like, still in my bathrobe, maybe cup of coffee on a morning like this, a fire, But no, you're here for your marriages. Perhaps you see after last night what I meant by this is kind of a different sort of marriage conference. I'm making this as complicated as it is, all right? In other words, half of what I do is put marriages back together, and this is actually how I do it. This is not dumbed down too much. I mean, this is kind of how I think about people and issues. And when church leaders ask me, how do we make sense of marriages? I say, be willing to get complex, all right? But I am pushing you. There was an old man at our church when I was young. Well, he was old when I was young, and he was old when he finally passed. He had this big, long beard. We called him Moses. He was old as Alabama, let me tell you. But he was one of my favorite people. His name is Mr. Lemon. I have a couple of Mr. Lemon stories. But one day at a men's prayer breakfast, we had some marriage professor from the seminary come talk to us for an hour about all the dynamics and sub-dynamics of the marital dyad and the intercommunicational subjectivity of blah, blah, blah. And at some point during a quiet moment near the end, old Mr. Lemon said loud, because he was hard of hearing, loud enough for everybody to hear. He leans over to his friend, he goes, "I'm just glad I got married before it got so complicated." So if you're feeling that this weekend, yeah, mea culpa, right? I'll tell you another Mr. Lemon story. Okay, when I was a teenager, I was walking through the hall, and Mr. Lemons passed me in the hall at the church. He goes, "John, you been reading your Bible?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm a teenager, right?" "Oh, yeah, Mr. Lemon, been reading my Bible." He goes, "You reading it every day?" I'm like, "Oh, yes, sir, yes, sir." He goes, "Well, we've had it down at the Lost and Found at the church for about 6 months. So you ever?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Lemon." Okay. So we talked about 4 areas that we got to have ticking in our hearts in order to make real life and real relationships work, and to manage our emotional world, and to be functional, and to do a job, and to parent, and to do life in any way. And I've called them issues that are the issues of intimacy and identity and imperfection and impulse control, and mostly that inability, that humble, open repentance, to sort of recognizing I have my 50% of the contribution to our stuff. And our point last night was not that you struggle in your marriage not just because your spouse is a jerk or a sinner, or you married the wrong person, but all of us are missing some of this software, some of these character abilities inside of us that we need to make life work. So this morning we're going to look at 2 of them in more detail. Remember how I said last night that all of life in a sense could be boiled down to closeness and connection, but also mutuality and separateness? That's kind of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about intimacy right now, making sense of that first I more. And then we're going to talk about, in a sense you could say, identity, because what we're going to talk about after the break is conflict and fighting, and what to actually do, when it gets right down to it, when you're in the middle of the fray. I wish we could do all of them. Again, my podcast has lots of other stuff, other directions, growth dynamics and whatnot. And like I said, a whole conference on growth. And there's another marriage conference on there too. So we worked hard last night. Friday night is a paradigm shift. I require a lot of my Friday night audiences. I'm giving you a completely different way to think about marriage, and I worked you real hard. This morning, we're going to get to play a little bit more. We're going to get to apply the stuff. This will be a little bit lighter, so you kind of earned this. We did our homework, and we're going to keep going. So we're going to talk about intimacy, all right? I mean, if you're going to be in a marriage, you might want to learn about closeness. I mean, call me crazy, right? But guys often get a lot of hassle about this. But like I told you last night, it's not always the guy. I mean, I'm kind of the more relational, touchy-feely one in the relationship. But ladies, you know, you got to be married to us. And you go out to dinner with a guy, and you look across the table at him, and you say, "What are you thinking right now?" And you're thinking he's going to say, "Just that I got everything I need right now." But what he says instead is, "I was just thinking, that pigs are really big." I mean, have you ever thought about that? I mean, some of them, like, you could ride one, and that's your date night out with one of us, right? All right. So this is difficult sometimes, but it's what marriage is for. Remember, naked and not ashamed, remember? And when the Bible says that, it's not describing some kind of nudist colony. It's describing a relational status. It's saying, try this on, guys, because I know you don't have a category for it. But Adam and Eve, in their relationship, were able to be fully themselves, and it was loved. They could express some pain or some sorrow or some longing or some need, and it was welcomed. And there was no hiding, and there was no criticism, and you express an idea, and it's embraced and received, and who they were was just loved as they were, naked and not ashamed. Anybody interested? We'll pass a sign-up sheet around. And we would all sign, because this is what we all long for. I think it's what heaven will be like. That kind of connection and intimacy with God and with one another, all right? Because it's not good for the man to be alone. And when God says that, that's not just about the invention of marriage. It's about the invention of connection and relationship. So we're going to talk this morning about what God calls abiding and knowing. What we called let you in, keep you in from last night. What shrinks call attachment and emotional intimacy. So this talk's kind of expanding that. Now we're going to talk about three things this morning about intimacy. Sort of what it is. There are different levels of intimacy, and I want you to have those categories. Secondly, some ways in which I see couples struggle with dynamics of intimacy and closeness in their relationship, and some ways that they dance, which is going to be key. And thirdly, sort of how we can both grow there, okay? So, number one, what do we mean when we talk about intimacy and closeness? I realized one day, years ago, people were always talking about communication issues and intimacy issues in a marriage. And by the way, no matter what reason a couple comes to see me in my office, I mean, they could be poisoning each other's soup. But what they say to me is, "I just think we have communication problems." And I'm like, seems to me like you can communicate that you hate each other's guts very well. Thank you very much. Your communication is crystal. But people always seem to think that. But anyway, what are we talking about when we talk about intimacy? What do we actually mean? I was seeing a couple once, and as we were talking, I said, one of the things I really want to help develop more in y'all's relationship is I want you guys to have a lot more intimacy. And the dude looks at me and goes, "Awesome." And his wife goes, "He means emotional intimacy." All right, so I want to make sure we're on the same page here, okay? So to understand intimacy, you got to understand there's different levels of it. Talking about emotional connection is a relative term. It's like saying rich. Okay, are you rich? Well, if you're rich in, Mountain Brook, Birmingham, it's different from being rich in Lickskillet, Tennessee, okay? It's kind of different terms here, all right? So, like, when one spouse says, "I really want to know you," and the other spouse is like, "Well, I like, watching my sports team in my boxers, so we're good," right? We got a problem, all right? So I want us to talk about some levels, some concentric circles of intimacy, what it is, what it's not, some levels of it, so we're all on the same page. First level, I just call drive-through. And this is the kind of level of emotional intimacy in which you say things like, "Do you want fries with that?" Or, "Would you push 4 for me on the elevator?" In other words, this is just people who you cross paths with. It happens all the time. How you doing? Fine. The only reason you're interacting here is because you're occupying nearby space, all right? If this describes the depth of intimacy in your marriage, please see me after class, okay? Number 2, news, sports, and weather. I alluded to this last night. This is what we do all morning. What we did this morning when we were just chit-chatting, like, "I can't believe the traffic, or it's so nice and crisp outside." It hadn't been this crispy and cold in Mississippi yet. I hope it has for y'all. But, I mean, have you heard about so-and-so? And you just chit-chat, news, sports, and weather. Get it? And most relationships begin there. Like I said last night, we got to do superficial sometimes just to function. That's kind of how we interact with people, and most relationships begin with that. Actually, you actually have to be able to do it in some sense. I had a friend in Los Angeles when I was in school who couldn't be superficial. Okay, so you'd see her on campus, and you'd go, "Hey, Sally, how's it going?" And she'd go, "Well, I've been having some anxiety and some depressive ideation regarding issues of my family of origin." You're like, "Yeah, back at you. Yeah, me too, Sally." Yeah. Anyway, so you got to be able to do news, sports, and weather to be a normal person, right? People are always asking me at parties and stuff like, "Oh, you're a psychologist. You analyzing me?" I'm like, "Really? Are you doing my taxes? I mean, what? You think I live like this? I cut it off, man." Anyway, but if you stay here, if that's all you do, you're going to be superficial. You're going to be boring. You're not going to really know the truth again, okay? Like we said, the truth about our hearts. This is still superficial. And a lot of marriages settle into just the news, sports, and weather thing. This is kind of the roommate phenomenon. In other words, we're just going to talk about the kids and about, have you heard about so-and-so and blah, 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 and that's all they do, all right? Next is TCB. We got any Memphis fans here? What's TCB mean? Taking care of business, exactly. All right, Elvis in Memphis, he had this entourage of guys who kind of followed him around and got all his stuff done. They called him the Memphis Mafia. And their little catchphrase was, "Hey, Elvis, taking care of business, taking care of business." And they were always handling things in his life. It actually should be TCBB, taking care of business, baby. All right? But anyway, this is where we live practically, with friends, with workers. This is what I'm doing now. This is what you do at work. We actually talk about things and try to solve a problem. We go, wow, my pants aren't fitting so well. Maybe you should lose some weight. Maybe you should look into that. Or I think we really need to work to stay within our budget. Or you've really been down lately. Are you still exercising? In other words, we're offering solutions and trying to fix things. This is, you should tell me about your problem and let me give you my opinion about how you solve it. This is Martha in the Bible, doing and working, all right? And this is probably where we'd spend most of our practical time. This is legit. TCB, I don't want to diss TCB in this talk on intimacy, okay? We need to be practical to make life work, which some of us relational types have trouble doing, all right? I told Mike earlier, it's like, before we do Q&A later, remind me to do so-and-so. Why? Because I know I need somebody who's practical and can help me solve some problems, remember things, all right? So TCB is useful. But if that is as far down as you can go, then your life is going to run like a sewing machine, and people are going to like you. And this is more intimate than anything we've talked about so far. This is your thoughts, your opinions, okay? But if this is as deep as you can go at all relationally, it's actually going to be sad. Like sadder than that scene where they lock up Dumbo's mother. That's sad, all right? Because there's going to be a sense, as I said last night, in which people, we won't really know you, all right? This is still in your deepest heart. And this is a talk on intimacy, so I want to at least create a category for more of our deepest heart. Marriage needs that kind of intimacy. I mean, Adam had meaningful work to do in the garden. He was a taxonomist. He was subduing the earth. He was naming animals. And God said, not good. We got to get a relational dynamic going in there. All right? So the solution orientation is the first commandment in Scripture. God says, go TCB. So it's a good thing. But then he says it's not good for you to only do that. Let's go a little bit deeper, which takes us to level 4. And God calls it abiding, so will I. Now, this is Jedi level, boys and girls, okay? This is where I'm finally actually strong enough. I have some of the categories and software and character grounding enough to be the person I really am with the person I love. It actually takes more emotional gravity to do that, to give up being, Steve McQueen or, people who have it all together, Gwyneth Paltrow, I don't know, and just be the person I am with the person I love, okay? So this has let you in from last night. This is where I get to This is actually the only place I get to look into someone else's eyes and know that those eyes know me and that those eyes love me and they know some garbage about me, but those eyes still love me. You don't get that at any other level, all right? So I want to develop that a little bit. That's the foundation for a rich marriage, okay? There's another way of saying this. You've heard the term a true self, kind of real you, kind of non-chameleon you, kind of really who John is, you know? There's a old Chris Rock joke. Chris Rock's my favorite Reformed theologian, by the way. I actually got a text from a woman at another church. I had done the conference, and I just told that joke. I got a text from her last week. She says, okay, I was trying to remember who your favorite Reformed theologian was because I want to start reading them. I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't mean Chris Rock? Do you don't know who Chris Rock is? Look at this. He's the most irreverent, whatever. Please don't tell anybody else that he's my favorite Reformed theologian. So R.C. Sproul was one of my teachers. Uses that. Anyway, Chris Rock says, when somebody first meets you, they ain't meeting you. They're meeting your representative. Somebody sent ahead to make you look good. All right? So true self means the real me. All right? Who I am, what it feels like to be me, how I feel about my life. All right? That sense of really who I am inside. And basically, true self intimacy, let you in, is true self, true experience of me shared. That's all it is. All right? We're not making rocket fuel here. Okay? Think about it superficially. You wake up in the morning, what is your experience? You wake up Monday morning. You think, oh, I slept good. Or, oh, God, it's Monday. Ugh. Or, but I had that fun lunch today. Okay, that'll be cool. Okay, well, then that meeting is Wednesday. I got to get ready for that. In other words, you have this experience inside of you. Okay, that's your internal world. That's your emotional world. That's you. Okay, everyone shake hands with you. All right. Anyway, TCBers, that's why your spouse always wants to talk to you about your day. Not because they're secretly writing the life of Dr. John L. Cox, but because your experience of your day, your experience of your life is who you are. It is your heart. And they want to know you there. They don't want to go to every meeting you're ready to forget. They want to know you, okay? So that's intimacy in a sense. Who I am and what it feels like to be me shared. Now that's easy. That's something superficial. That's like waking up on Monday morning. Let me go a little bit deeper, because what abiding level, let you in, emotional world also includes are things we feel more heart level, like I alluded to last night. Vulnerable or tender or meaningful or scared or hurt. Am I aware of those? Can I go inside and know those and bring those to you? Let me illustrate this. I'm going to tell you the same story, and I'm going to tell it TCB version, and I'm going to tell it abiding version. And you tell me if you can feel the difference. My dad flew early jets in the 50s, T-33s, and we always flew. And he taught me to fly as a little boy, and I flew my whole life. We've always flown. And about 8 years ago, when he was 82, I found a guy in New Mexico who had a rebuilt T-33. And he did jet training for people who wanted to get certification there. And I said, Dad, check this guy out. If this plane's for real, you and me are going to New Mexico, and you are going to fly your jet again before you die. And you know what else? I'm going to fly your jet. And so we went to New Mexico, and we flew the T-Bird, the T-33. Took my little mom along. It was awesome, okay? That's the TCB version. I gave you the story, all right? Here's the abiding version of the same story. I'll never forget what it was like to walk out on the tarmac with him and my mom. I had seen so many pictures of that airplane, and it's sitting on the tarmac ready for us with the canopies up. The owner would sit in the front seat and let us sit in the co-pilot seat and basically gave us the plane. And I watched my dad climb up in that plane and the canopy close and that Allison engine start to spin up and start whistling like a tea kettle as they taxi away. And I'm standing there with my little mom, who has so many stories about what it was like when Bill was in the Air Force, you know. It smells like kerosene. And they go down, we watch them down at the end of the runway, and you can see the heat bloom before you can hear them. And before you knew it, it's like, and there goes my dad. And I start screaming and yelling, "Oh, Dad, go!" And then I got to fly it. Do you feel the difference in the stories? And the second one, you got my heart. The first one you heard about jet, right? TCBers, that's what your spouse is longing for. They want to know the kerosene smell. This works for you engineer types. We got an engineering story here. They want to know how the Allison engine smells, okay? So can I share my heart with you? That's all we're talking about. Nothing spooky and psychological. We're not rolling chicken bones here, right? We're just talking about sharing me, okay? So to have a relationship in which hearts matter, what we feel has to be a part of that. And like I said, it's like the Ben Shapiro thing, facts don't care about your feelings. That's true regarding practical reality. I don't feel like God loves me. That's not good information about reality, but what I feel is the best information about my heart. And if I want you to know me, I will engage that. There's another side of this too. I can share me, but another part of this kind of intimacy is hear you. Let me give you an example of that. A client told me this story not long ago. He comes in from work. His wife's mother is very ill and has sitters and all this stuff. And he comes in and she looks super down. And he says, "Are you okay?" And she goes, "Another one of Mom's sitters just quit, and I'm just exhausted and discouraged." And he's been training in my dojo. And so instead of going, "Well, don't they have like agencies and stuff to address that?" He goes, "Oh my gosh. It's like this never ends, does it?" And she said, "No." He said, "It's like as soon as you get one brush fire put out, there's another one. It's like whack-a-mole. No matter how hard you try, it's just always the phone ringing, and I know you're exhausted." And she started to cry. Why? Because she was understood. She was gotten. He heard her and tried it on and talked to her about it, okay? Another secret of the universe. And that is one of the most powerful ways we express love is by being understood, knowing what someone else feels, trying it on and talking to them about them. So when that happened, you must have felt so-and-so. And it's funny, as a psychologist, one of the things I found is the sensation, the feeling of being gotten, of being understood, is so close to the feeling of being loved that they're almost indistinguishable. That's one of the reasons that we fight, by the way, we'll get to in the next part of the morning, is we fight to be understood. "No, you don't get it. That's not what I said." Isn't that what we say in a fight? What are we saying there? I'm longing to be understood. See how much is part of our lives? Now, my client, he got it emotionally first. That doesn't mean they can't swing back later and say, "You want to rethink some of the stuff about how to deal with these sitters? Let's try to solve this problem." We're not throwing TCB out. You just don't lead with it. Okay? You come back to it. We don't abdicate the practical solutions, but we need to engage other people with their emotional world first. By the way, that's actually a principle for psychology. A lot of the things that we feel are bogus. We feel crazy stuff, but we have to be heard and understood first before we can get corrected. Basic rule of psychology. I think we talk about that a little bit more later on too, okay? So that's intimacy too. Can I hear you? All right? In a sense, there's that. Being gotten feels like being loved. That is super important. We're talking about empathy here, that I can try on what it feels like to be you. All right? So, letting you in, telling you my heart, hearing who you are. So, TCB Elvis, what she means, or as I said, not all Elvises, not all TCBers are women. or men, they're women too. What he is wanting to do when he's complaining about work is for an abider person, for a connector relational person, who we feel, what we feel, what's going on in our emotional world is the deepest part of who we are. And if you want to care about building your relationship there, I want you to understand that dynamic, that's sort of core to being a human. God calls it our heart. All right, now I'm going to grant you this. Emotions and what people feel will not always make sense. All right? In other words, one night, Norma woke me up in the middle of the night. I wake up, she just slugs me on the shoulder. I'm like, what? And she's all mad. And she's like, I just had this dream. We were driving through the desert, and you just drove off and left me there. I'm a mental health professional, and I don't know how to respond to this. Okay? What I said was, well, go back to sleep. I'll come pick you up. I'm not... What are you supposed to say? You know? So feelings aren't going to always make sense. I don't want to, worship at the psychological altar of what we feel. But it's the core way in which we connect. Okay, I want you to get that piece. And TCBers have a point. We're not throwing out the TCBers. I just want to add a new category for you folks. This a couple I was seeing, he was a super TCBer and always fixing every problem. And he'd been working pretty hard to kind of engage the deal of kind of, can you hear her and can you care about her without jumping to fix it? And so he comes downstairs to go to work, and she goes, oh, honey, I just went out in there's a flat. The car has a flat on it. And he said, I can try on and imagine that must have lots of feelings for you. You probably feel anxious and a little frantic and helpless. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to go to work. And he was teasing. He fixed the tire, but I thought, that was good. I get it. Somebody's got to fix the tire. That's your takeaway, TCBers. Yeah, Cox is right, but somebody's got to fix the tire, right? Okay, we're going to give you that. By the way, this kind of intimacy connection, I believe, is foundational for sexuality. Most people who struggle in their sexual part of their relationship are people who are missing something in the intimacy relational part of the relationship. Okay, there's a sense in which I like to say that sex is, in a sense, a language. It's a language to communicate a depth of connection. All right. So a lot of times people who have struggles in the sexual part of their relationship is because the relational part of their relationship is missing some things. And when I work with people on sexual issues, one of the things I ask about is what's going on in terms of your emotional connection, because sex is supposed to be just an outworking of that. Okay, y'all can ask me more about that on text. I'm sure you won't ask me publicly about that. But okay, remember we do marriage jokes. A couple of sex jokes here. These aren't jokes. These happened. I was seeing this guy, and he had been to another therapist, and this was one of those therapists who says, write down the things you want to achieve, which I don't do this. So anyway, he brings me his list of things that he wants to have different in his life, like in his marriage and all that, and hands it to me, saying, I thought this might help you. And I look at it, and one of them was sex with wife at least once a week with enthusiasm. This guy knows his stuff. I mean, he's been around the block. He knows to be specific. There's qualities to this experience. Another guy said, I'm going to ask my wife, to teach me, her skills at, initiating sex. Because, currently, as we speak, she has a 100% success rate. So. What's her secret? All right. Another, by the way, here. Couples in the trenches always ask me at this point, yeah, Doc, that sounds awesome and cute and all that stuff, but, our lives are so crazy busy with the jobs and the kids and all that. Sometimes it doesn't feel like we have the bandwidth to, sit and be intimate and all that kind of stuff. Good question. Couple answers. Number one, you're right. If I could draw on my board, I would draw you this. I saw a graph when I was in grad school that graphed marital satisfaction over the lifespan. And it's it starts out over here, early marriage, you're pretty high on your marital satisfaction, and then you have kids and it dips down like this and stays in this kind of U shape for a while until you kind of get your feet on the ground or the kids start getting older and you start getting a little more breathing room, and then you're empty nesters like I am and you're back up here again. So what I used to tell couples when I was parents and married folks when I was teaching back at my church in Jackson is you're living in the bottom of the U, okay? And that's just part of the hard reality of the face of life with littles and all that, and you're gummy and sticky. And I remember we'd see our friends would be walking into church and they'd be dragging kids in the door and they'd go, "How y'all doing?" And they'd say, "We're in the bottom of the U," you know. So I want to kind of validate that. Yeah, it's hard to do emotional connection with all the junk in life with littles and all that. But number two, and I think this one's more important, intimacy is not about date night. I don't want you to get that from me here, okay? Intimacy is not about you and me having some special knee-to-knee sharing time where we talk about our feelings, and that's great to have that. But real intimacy is simply living life. I know your heart, you know mine. Okay? I had a couple not long ago who said, I think we got it. Here's what intimacy sounded like to us the other night. We finally got the kids down. It was the end of the week, and one of us said to the other one, "I'm just too exhausted to do anything tonight. You want to just collapse? I don't have anything to give." And the other one said, "Yeah, I don't have anything to give either. You want to just be together?" And I'm like, yeah, that's intimacy. Intimacy doesn't necessarily mean pouring out your heart. It can be just being tired people together. All right? I know some of the best intimacy I ever had in my marriage was across a gurney in an ER while one of my kids' broken leg was getting set. And you're scared, and your eyes meet hers, and hers meet yours, and y'all are together in that. That's intimacy. We're together. All right? You'll always have that. So answer number two is broaden your definition. We don't do intimacy, we live intimacy. It's like real connection is not, holding hands at a two-top. Real connection is just simply that I'm going to let you be part of my experience and you part of yours, and we do life together. That's intimacy too, okay? Which again reminds me, I'm pushing on intimacy and abiding because that's the topic here. But TCB is still so important. I don't want to diss the TCBers. I mean, practically speaking, we're not going to live at this level of deep intimacy all the time, okay? And we kind of have to TCB to function. Y'all know those couples who are both abiders? And all they do is sort of abide in gazing loveliness all the time, and they have like a family tree house. And they make Chinese hot air balloon lanterns and float them off and make wishes and stuff like that. But they've got like 8 kids in dirty diapers and 2 rusty Subarus in the garage, and nobody's running this love fest, Nobody's paying the bills. But man, they're like connected, man, So practical life is important, and which is, by the way, one of the reasons that us emotional connector types marry you TCBers. Because when we were dating, you felt so practical and grounded compared to us, and you made life happen, and that felt really safe and cool back then. And now we resent you for it because you're so unemotional. It's like, well, that's why we married you. Because if you were as emotional as me, we'd just spin off into orbit. We kind of need that left brain, all right? So it's a good match, okay? The goal, by the way, is to be integrated. And that is, there's growth for each. Remember our dynamic of mutual growth? I'm broken, so are you, humility. Sure, TCBers, learn more about this intimacy thing. But we're about to shift gears here. For us connectors, we need to be learning more about containing feelings, going frontal lobe, solving problems apart from connection, which brings us to part number 2. Remember last night I said, part of intimacy is let you in. Can I share my feelings? Can I be with you emotionally? And that's great. And I said, but all of us touchy-feely types are going, oh my gosh, this is the whole story. It's not, because there's another part, remember? Can I keep you in? And this is vital. So, I'm pretty clear that we need to have that whole dynamic of sharing who we are and what we feel emotionally. But our question, relational abider types, is what do I do with intimacy when I get it? In other words, am I able to hold on to love? Am I able to live in trust and groundedness? Am I able to live in some independence from my spouse and not always just need connection all the time? So our question is not, can you share your feelings? We do that ad nauseum. Our question is, can we stay grounded, even if we're not sharing feelings right now, and still know you love me? Like I said last night, what most marriage experts do is they talk about marriage and they say, y'all just need to share more. And that is exactly one half of the story, all right? The deficits and struggles that we have keeping you in, holding on to love, trusting, and being grounded are just as problematic as that digital left brain spouse who can't share their feelings, okay? That is vital. So our question is, can we trust? Can we stay grounded? Can we have some self-sufficiency, even if you really are, solving problems or watching the ball game or something like that? Intimacy is like playing catch. Sure, somebody has to throw the ball, but our question is, how good are we at catching it and keeping it? Okay? Remember that guy, that marriage expert in the 90s who'd say, women need 5 meaningful touches a day in order to feel loved. And I'm like, okay. But my only question is what does she do with the first 4? I'm just curious, how many touches is enough? At what point do I sort of hold on to the first 4 and go, now, babe, I'm good now. You can go back to your game, whatever. Let me tell you why that's important. If we don't do that, connectors, what starts to happen is our TCB or spouse starts to experience our hunger and longing for connection as this sort of urgency and neediness that they're supposed to meet, or else. And it's off to the races. And we start what I call a dance. We got to talk about this. Because secret of the universe for understanding marriages is you got to understand that marriage is dance. And what I mean by that is this. Marriage problems are not cause and effect. Like cue ball hits the 8 ball in the corner pocket. Whose fault is it? We wouldn't have this problem if only you. Marriage problems are more like that water cycle you learned about in 6th grade science, You did a science project on that, right? Water evaporates and it condensates and it precipitates, the water cycle. All right, now where does that start? I don't know, chicken or the egg. Marriages are exactly the same way. This is how marriage dynamics work. I do A, which makes you do B. And when you do B, it makes me do A more. And now you do B more. All right? Secret of the universe for understanding marriage. We're going to blow this up in the conflict talk in a second. But I want you to understand that category. Here's an example of a dance, just so you can get the vibe. I saw a couple once, and he was really kind of a dominant guy, and she had always sort of been meek and kept things to herself, which made her depressed. And she decided that she was going to start showing up more and having more of a voice. She wanted to be present in the relationship. But she also had gotten a little feisty because she was tired of him controlling her. So she would bring her opinions. Good, welcome your opinions. But she'd bring them with a little edge to them because she was kind of ticked at this whole thing. Well, he would hear the little edge. And instead of going, honey, thank you for sharing your heart. We can let that be part. He would go, oh my gosh, you're just trying to control me. And in other words, he'd get all threatened, which would make him get bigger and meaner. What would she do? She would hear that as like, oh, see, he's really trying to control me. I'm going to get even feistier. Oh, yeah? You can't tell me what I feel and what to do. And so she starts to bow up more, which he hears as, wow, she's really throwing it at me. I can't believe you're acting blah, blah, blah. And you see, they just feed on each other in this cycle. That's a dance. One of the things that I do in premarital and pre-engagement is help a couple learn their dance. Because, they're going to dance it for the rest of their marriage. They might as well learn it now, okay? So let's talk about some dances with intimacy. Kind of like dances with wolves, but without the Indians, all right? So a lot of times you'll get a real abider who marries a real TCBer. And like I said, these aren't polars. They're not, what's the word I'm looking for? Polarities. They're not absolutes, whatever like that. But I want you to have the categories. And you do tend more toward one or the other. So a biter comes with all these feelings. They want to share their heart. I'm afraid of this. I wish that. I'm so sad about this. In other words, all these level 4 abider feelings. Now, what does TCB Elvis or Elvira, man or woman TCBer, what do they say to that? They hear all these feelings, and what do they say? They're like, why don't you take up jogging? Or you give me the phone, I'll tell her where she can put her carpool. Okay? In other words, who cares how you feel about this? That doesn't solve any problems, right? Now, by the way, why do they do that? Abiders, why do they do that? Is it because they don't care about you? Is it because they're jerks? No, that's what they do that because that's what level 3 is about. They're problem solvers, remember? That's why I'm giving you these categories. Nobody's the bad guy. Remember, we got rid of blame marriage in the first 10 minutes, right? This is just the level at which they're relating. They're getting off on the 3rd floor, not the 4th. Okay? So if you're communicating something about emotional connection to somebody who only is a problem solver, their default is accidentally, if they're not paying attention, they're going to kind of go try to solve it. And that doesn't mean that they're bad people or anything. That's just their edge of growth. Okay? No blame marriage, remember? Anyway, the dance. So a biter wants to feel all intimate and close, and TCB Elvis wants to just fix it and be done with it. Well, all of that problem solving and solutions doesn't feel very good to the abider spouse. So they ain't very happy. So what do they start doing? And we start the dance. They start demanding closeness from Elvis. And they start criticizing him for being such a distant flatliner. You know, all you want is sex. Instead of being married, you should have stayed in the frat house. And living with you is like living with an android. And, you know, those things, of course, just woo him back to her, right? In other words, problem-solving Elvis or Elvira hears this as super critical. In other words, to their ears, you're saying the worst thing you can possibly say to a problem-solving bottom liner, and that is they're failing in their job of making you happy. God, number one thing I hear from TCB spouses in my office, their abider spouse will come in and go, I feel this and I feel that, and I want our marriage to have this and I want our marriage to have that. And I'll look at the TCB and go, what do you want? And they'll go, I just want him to be happy. In other words, they're feeling like they're a constant disappointment to this person who's wanting all this emotional connection, and they don't really know how to do that. All right? So, TCB is feeling real criticized by this point, so what do? The exact thing, here's the dance, they do the exact thing the abider wants the least. They withdraw more. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to connect with you and it's not good enough, and so I'm getting the heck out of Dodge. I'm getting on ESPN or the golf course, pick a card. Now Priscilla really feels abandoned emotionally. He's on Timbuk, man. He's in G sector somewhere, all right? So she's really upset and starts really demanding, like, so I guess you're just going to sit there and say nothing, huh? Okay, and the dance continues. And Elvis pulls away even more, and a biter gets more critical and disappointed, and they'll do that to the old folks' home, okay? I said that in some northern state. Where's Milwaukee? Wisconsin. And afterwards, the preacher said, I don't think anybody here calls it an old folks' home. But I think in North Alabama, I'm safe, right? Yeah. Anyway, this is one of the most common dances for couples with intimacy. I call it the approacher avoider dance. And the only way to stop it is to start to get a perspective that, hey, we're dancing. This is what Cox was talking about. We'll call this going bird's eye in our next talk. To have that ability to step back from your conflict and start learning about it. I want to give you this category of what dancing is because you do it all over the place. All right? So learn your dances. All right. What intimacy is. We looked at some levels of it. We looked at both sides of it. Keep you in, let you in. Some problems and some dances. How do we grow here? Let's start with TCB Elvis. Number one, ladies or men, TCBers, learn to see the relational world as valid, some legitimacy to it, okay? I think you're getting that point here from me this morning. And if you don't know how to do it, find relational people to teach you. It's not that hard to learn. I actually am not innately an abider. I had to learn to be a touchy-feely abider. I was more of a TCBer. But you can have people teach you, okay? I mean, a lot of guys feel like they mishear this. A lot of guys feel like that, if you're going to be into being emotionally connected, it means you got to go, open up on the golf course or something. Like, hey, guys, do you ever feel like crying for no reason? So say stuff like that. I just want y'all to know I got this ache and void within me. That's not what I'm talking about, all right? Intimacy just means having some relationships in which I can be open and safe. And there's a lot of talk in our culture about, men are into goal attainment and solving problems, and women are into relating and all that kind of stuff. And there's some validity, Venus and Mars kind of stuff. There's some validity to that, but don't buy the whole enchilada on that one, all right? I mean, think about it. How'd this marriage stuff start? God didn't come to Adam and go, hey, look, I know you're slick with your ESPN and your mountain bike, but how do I say this? I'm going to make a woman, and you're going to have to, she's going to need a lot. You're going to have to learn communication skills. You're going to have to learn to share your feelings. But do this for me, Adam. That's not how it started. God comes to Adam and says, I see that you're in a place of deep need. It's not good for the man to be alone. Let me make a relationship that's built to help fulfill your heart. All right? So to the degree that we're not engaged in this is legit, we're out of step in some way. And oftentimes we'll see fruit of it in other forms in our lives if we're not connected. A lot of times some of our depression or addictions or stuff like that can happen from that. So TCBers, if you don't see this stuff as important, see that as a problem. And if your spouse is saying you don't get it, give them some credence there. We all have blind spots, all right? So we'll need growth people to do that. People who help call those parts of us out. We can talk about that more in Q&A if you want. Second message is learn what it means to be with. Basically, what TCBers feel like they need to do when someone they're close to has a problem is they feel like they have to go fix it, right? Yuck. I mean, here's this person I live with who's always emoting about things they're unhappy about, and I'm always having to go in there and resolve it. Now, that would become overwhelming to anybody, which means at some point, I just sort of throw up my hands and blow them off because it's too much to always be fixing their problems and their feelings. And I'm gone now, and we start the dance, right? So good news. You don't have to fix it, okay? Let me give you a simple little model for engaging people who are struggling or who are in pain. This model is actually in my parenting book, too. I use this all over the place. It's a great way to think about, I use it with Body of Christ teaching, like small groups. A great way to think about how to engage other people who are struggling. Blow off, fix, or with. Blow off, basically, somebody's hurting and we're like, get over it, or you should have seen how hard my day was, or, first world problems. This is kind of starving kids in Africa approach. Like, I don't really care about your pain, get over it. You tell your kids, it's like, in 10 years you won't even remember this game. It's like, I'm going to blow off your feelings. Fix is where we jump in, and it's like, we're going to get on a weight loss program together, and we're going to solve this problem, and all right, I'm going to try to fix it. With, I want you to learn what with is. With is simply my heart meets your heart. With, I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm not going to try to change you, but I get it. I may even try it on with you. I may talk with you about it. I care about what you feel here. And for some reason that I do not understand, and I should understand because it's my job, being with somebody else, what did I say last night? Pain with is halved. There's something transformational about somebody being with us in our pain. I don't even understand why it works. It just does. So somebody's dealing with a death. Blow off says, well, all things work together for good, Fix says, hey, after the funeral, let's go, to New Orleans and have a party. What does with do? With says, you know why you don't know what to say at a funeral? Because there's nothing to say at a funeral. What do you say? We love y'all. We can't believe you're going through this. We're going to walk through it with you. Get it? With you. We're going to be at your side. Same with your spouse. What with sounds like is they're talking about their heart or a big disappointment, you don't need to take it on to fix it. You say, baby, I so care. And I see how bad that would have felt. I mean, you did all that work at work and somebody else got the credit for it. That is awful. What can I give you? And you know what? 90% of the time they're going to say, nothing. I just wanted you to know. I just wanted you with me. Now, for some reason, I don't understand. That is so healing. Okay? So, fixers, you want to fix? Cool. Fix away. This is how you fix it. Just fix the right thing. Okay? This does fix it. You want to fix? Hear them, and it fixes them. I know you got to kind of hold your mouth just right to make sense of it. But I promise you it works, all right? I had a TCB guy ask me after a conference once, he goes, I get all this, but what if her feelings are wrong? She says everybody in the church hates her, and that's just not true. Remember what I said earlier. Wounded feelings, hurting feelings never get better unless they're heard first. Be with first. Baby, I know, and it's so hard for you, and it feels like people just don't care. Secondly, you can swing in later on and say, I do know some things that might mitigate against those feelings you have. If you want to know them, let me know. Because I hate to see you hurting so much. On their terms, see, and I do it second. We're not throwing away the TCB. We're not throwing away the solutions. We're not making this either or. You just got to lead with the heart if you want intimacy, okay? Now, by the way, everything I've just said is applicable to repentant people. Okay, the unrepentant people, there's a difference. This is kind of a different kettle of fish. And also with people who are just chronic whiners and complainers. You know, I can kind of hear it after about 2 sessions in my office, somebody who, they want to talk about their pain, and I'll kind of empathize and engage them a couple of sessions, and pretty soon I realize, no, they're getting off on this. They just love being a victim and talking about how painful their life is. And at that point, I will shift gears a little and say, wow, this is like, has really been haunting you for a long time. How can I help you? What would you like to do? Start getting creative about ways you can find some power and get yourself out of this situation. And I sort of challenge them more to go a little more TCB. All right? So it's a mighty thin dime that don't have two sides, remember? All right, now pursuers, abiders, what do we need to hear? Number one, learn to ask for closeness rather than demand it or criticize for it. Get that disappointed vibe out of it. Part of the dance is you want to be heard and understood. Your TCB spouse doesn't do that, and we get all hurt and exasperated and disappointed, and we start the dance again. Number one, learn to ask. I was talking to a woman not long ago, and she said, I made supper, we sat down at the table, and he immediately got on his phone. So naturally, I said, could you just put down your phone for like 5 minutes and talk to me? Makes me want to cuddle. How about you? In other words, to the degree that your longing for more connection turns into this disappointed demand, cue the dance, baby. They're going to pop smoke. They're going to go to Neptune. You're going to have less connection, all right? Because they feel like they've disappointed you again. Learn the dance. I want you to ask them. Really sophisticated stuff here. 40 years of clinical practice, and that's what I got. Ask them. I might say, hey, I'd like to be closer to you later on this evening. Can we kind of work that into our plan? I would love that. Or would you be willing to, once you finish that on your phone, would you be willing to put your phone down and us interact? I've missed you. By the way, I love the phrase, would you be willing? It begins this by saying, this is not about my control or my disappointment. This is a request. Would you be willing? Okay? And that's up to you. I'm not sitting here about to judge you, okay? And it gets that disappointed vibe out of there, which I think actually triples your chances of getting what you want. If you can curb your own, like, oh my gosh, you're so digital, why don't you talk to me more vibe? This is the keep you in piece, abiders, all right? So, ask, don't tell. Okay? Secondly, to abiders, this will come up on the slide later on. I want you to get this category that I don't think anybody talks about either. And that is, us connectors, we sort of have this sense like people ought to connect to me, right? You ought to want to listen to my stories and hear my feelings, right? One of the things us abiders need to recognize is that the need to be connected to, the longing for our spouse to hear us, is a big ask. In other words, it's not easy to listen to somebody else and their feelings. I do it for a living, and I charge a lot of money to do it. And you want your spouse to do it for free? For real? It's a gift for someone to listen to us. Another Chris Rock, I told you he was my favorite. Chris Rock says, when your woman says, I wish we talked more, what she's saying is, I wish I talked more. And you sat there and listened to me, all right? In other words, a lot of times us abiders don't recognize that this longing to be connected is a big ask, okay? I lived with a wife and 3 daughters. I lived with 4 women. My 5-year-old grandson, Shaw, like 2 weeks ago goes, wait, Papa, so you lived with Nani and Mama and Kiki and Kaka, and you were the only boy? And I'm like, and he's like, oh, man. I'm like, yeah, you get it? All they did was talk. All they wanted to do was to be heard. It was like, I had this fantasy in my head of, I always wanted one of those line umpire judge chairs from tennis, who like, in the middle of the game, it's like, quiet, please. And everybody gets quiet. It's like, I want one of those guys in the living room, man, right? Though, abiders, TCBers, they do have a point. I had a TCB guy tell me the other day, he said, I'm sitting there watching the game and my wife looks at me and goes, you haven't heard a single word I've said. Which I think is kind of a funny way to start a conversation. All right, number 3. For abiders, we got ask, don't tell. Number 2, recognize this is a big ask. Because we act like, well, you should just share your feelings and hear them. But no, it's a big thing to ask. Number 3, share, but remember your feelings are still your responsibility. Okay, this is huge for us connectors. Wonderful, thanks. What that sounds like is this. Instead of our saying, what is it that us abider connectors say? We're like, I feel lonely in our marriage. The unspoken Trojan virus implication is, what are you going to do about it? When are you going to take me to dinner more or connect with me better or whatever? Responsibility would say this. I'm realizing I'm feeling some loneliness and I'm not sure what that's about. It may be my issue. I'm talking to my body of Christ people about this. And it might be about us. I don't know, but I wanted you to be with me in it. Let's get curious together. But I wanted you to know that I'm kind of struggling here. Do you hear how different that is? And how much responsibility I'm taking? This is the 4th I, by the way, that managing my emotional reactivity, okay? And that's going to feel so good to your problem solver spouse, who otherwise is going to feel like you're dumping another problem on their doorstep to fix, and they're just going to pull away and start the dance, okay? Another way of saying this is that sharing your feelings is not the same as doing your feelings, like we said last night. In other words, I start sobbing and saying, I'm worried about our marriage. I'm just sharing my feelings. No, you're not. You're doing your feelings. Or saying, I'm really scared about your job. It's real different from saying, oh my gosh, we're going to be living in a trailer down by the river. I'm just sharing my feelings. No, you're not. You're carpet bombing the population with your feelings, okay? And that's just going to set your TCB spouse off. Number 4,
abiders, we need to have other resources in our life. And this applies to every one of us and to all the four eyes, all right? But let's apply it to intimacy right now. I know so many of you long for more closeness and connection in your marriages, and it's a great pain for you to have some of that missing. And I hope one of the things that I've made clear is how important that is. And I want you to be learning more about that in your marriage. And I hope that I've been communicating the importance of that. But there's more to the story than that. I know this is a cultural no-no to say this, but I alluded to it last night, and I'm going to punch it home a little harder today, and that is that I don't think marriage was ever intended to be the sole resource for meeting all of our heart's needs for intimacy. Well, maybe some kind of intimacy. Yeah, I think God created us to have some deepest sharing with our spouses. But if you think about it, the New Testament talks a lot more about intimacy in the body of Christ than it does intimacy in a marriage. And our culture, even our Christian culture, has turned marriage into this sort of ultimate fount of all of my needs. You know, and you just need some cute couple time and getaway weekend. And those of you who aren't married, we need to get you a wife. That's what we need. All right? And that is cultural. God doesn't say that. He says, in the body, love one another, share with one another, go to one another, confess to one another, be one together in the body. And since our culture has lost so much of that nurturing community, like we talked about last night, we create things like therapy and small groups, which is great. I mean, I'm all for that. But we've turned marriage into this wonderful place where I'm supposed to get all of my needs met. And so it's no wonder we're disappointed, which is one of the number one reasons people fight. You haven't met my longings and my expectations. But our culture has set those so high. And singles panic. What if I never get married? I'll miss out on the fount of wonder. So, TCBers, abiders, either way, to echo what I said last night, to have a good marriage, we need to have rich, truth-telling, powerful, loving relationships outside of our marriage. People who we've learned are safe and wise, and we need those people in the background to have a healthy marriage. Like what I was saying last night about the church, about the body of Christ. And this can just be one friend. It doesn't have to be a small group or a group of people or a church culture. It can be one person who you know has that safety we talked about last night. Otherwise, we have what most marriages are. And that is, I'm living trying to get all my emotional needs met by you, and you're living trying to get all of your emotional needs for respect or intimacy or whatever met by me, and we have a situation that we call in Mississippi. I will just articulate it well then. 2 ticks and no dog. That describes most marriages. So in order to just stop being a blood-sucking tick on each other, I want you to be developing these kind of relationships and becoming these kind of relationships. And abiders, what happens is we go to those relationships, we get all sorts of goodies, and we leave those interactions filled up, having more fullness. And then we come home to our spouse, and we don't have that urgency and that needfulness, and the dance doesn't happen. Presto. All right. Now, as Forrest Gump says, that's all I got to say about that. Let's take a break, maybe 10 max, 15 minutes. We'll start rounding y'all up. I think we're going to do more prizes or what? Anyway, ready, break. And we'll do conflict when you get back.